What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Her Hoop Stats podcast, your daily podcast from the Her Hoop Stats Network. Tyler and Richard holding it down here for you today. Richard, there was a couple of things that happened yesterday. Just a couple things here and there.
Another quiet Monday on the in the WNBA world.
You know the W. You know how the W is. Obviously today is Commissioner's Cup game, so that's going to be something we're tapped into tonight. But today we're hitting on just one of the big pieces of news that happened yesterday. And Richard, this is completely in your bag. This is your time to shine, because we had a trade, and a trade that was confusing at that in terms of the rules and everything that even allowed it to happen. NaLyssa Smith headed to the Las Vegas Aces from the Dallas Wings for a 2027 first-round pick. Richard, I know you were on the timeline explaining rules and everything yesterday. I'm just going to kind of give you the floor here to begin this before we dive into the actual fit and everything that comes with this trade. Tell me, why is this trade so confusing, and how does it work?
Okay, so partly it's confusing because whenever any WNBA team makes a trade, both sides have to finish the trade under the salary cap. That's a basic rule that this league has, because it's theoretically a hard cap unless you're using exceptions. But Las Vegas were already $60,000 to $70,000 over the salary cap because they're using the pregnancy childbirth exception to add an extra player, with Cheyenne Parker-Tyus being out so far this season to have her child. I don't know whether she's had it yet, but she's been out all season so far. But the league added a tweak to their rules in the last year where the replacements for a player out for that reason don't count for trade purposes. So as long as Vegas could get under the cap, not counting the players who've been designated as the replacements for Parker-Tyus, which was Crystal Bradford until she got cut, and then Joyner Holmes when she was signed as the replacement for Bradford, then the trade became legal. So what they ended up doing was waiving Elizabeth Kitley, waiving Tiffany Mitchell, which means that their salaries get prorated down to what has already been paid to them this season. So Mitchell goes down from just over 100,000 to counting just over 40,000 on the cap. Kitley goes down from around 70 to around 30. And between the amount they save from that and the amount they save from not having to count Holmes and Bradford, the trade becomes legal by about $9,000, which is not a lot considering they had to give up two players. So that got them there. The question is whether it was really worth doing in the first place.
Well, that's what I want to talk about next, because this trade, to me, first off, 2027 is a heck of a draft class. I don't know if you've heard, Richard. You might know a couple of those players. Potentially Juju Watkins is like the kind of the question mark in the air right now, obviously with her injury. But the Hannah Hidalgos, Madison Booker, that entire class is coming out in that draft. So just naturally, that is just a very genuinely valuable asset that you are trading up to go and get NaLyssa Smith. I think the Aces have been on an upward trend in comparison to where they started over the course of the season. But this is still inherently a win now move. Like you don't have a first round pick until the 2028 draft. You are making this move to help support this core now. I don't know if I'm exactly moved by that as like a move that like moves the needle enough to go and trade a first round pick of that caliber. And frankly, especially with the way that the CBA we don't know, like in terms of the CBA and how free agency will be and how all of that's going to work in the future. Who knows who's even on this roster by 2027? It genuinely, like, we don't know. And I don't know, like, to you, like, is NaLyssa Smith a needle mover in that way that can raise the Aces up in tiers of the WNBA right now?
I mean, I was a defender of the idea of some team adding NaLyssa Smith in the previous offseason we just had as like a gamble option, a sort of second chance, draft kind of player. I I didn't think Indiana got all that much for her in the end in that sort of big 4-way trade that they ended up combining lots of trades into one deal. But we've seen her get benched in Indiana. We've seen her basically get benched in Dallas for Geisel Soda, who'd only been there a couple of weeks at the time. She's not good defensively, which is where Vegas have had a major issue for most of this season. The main place where she would be considered an upgrade is that you're getting someone who has offensive skills,
right,
who can score more than someone like Kia Stokes or even Elizabeth Kitley, who they obviously don't have as an option now. I understand them wanting to make a move in that they didn't look good enough right now, but this is meant to be a team that's challenging for a championship.
Yeah.
I just don't think this move is going to make them an awful lot better. And I think Hammond is going to get frustrated with Smith's defense really quickly unless Vegas can teach her to be a much better defender than she's been in the last two places. And other coaches have tried. I mean, we've seen Vegas succeed in some ways in changing the way players play. We've seen them turn Jackie Young from a really good player into one of the top 10 players in the world. But can you do that with NaLyssa Smith's defense? So much of what she does not that well is mental more than it's like physical. She's obviously an athlete. She can move. But yeah, I'm not convinced they're going to be able to change enough of Smith's game to make her a difference maker for them. I don't mind the cost too much because they're backing themselves to be good. And with the amount of money they spend in Vegas and the fact that they'll be able to core Asia Wilson if they need to, I think, without going back to check that again. I forget how many times they've caught her before.
I want to say they can. Yeah, I don't feel like that's happened before. Yeah.
Yeah. So as long as the coring rule still exists after we have a new CBA, they're going to be able to keep hold of her. And they pay everyone so well in Vegas with the extra money that's coming through that they're probably still going to be good. So the pick in 2027 is probably going to be low in the first round. They're certainly gambling that it will be. And I understand that. But if you're making that gamble, I'd rather have got someone who I think is going to make more of a difference than Smith will.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I'm at with it. Because like it's obvious that they're fully expecting like Asia Wilson and Jackie Young to be here, and that your floor with them in Vegas is high enough that you're not worried about what the worst potential is with that draft pick. To me, that's where I get to it. Was your last point was that inherently I don't hate NaLyssa Smith going to Vegas. Like just in terms of like that, like if that is all the information I have, NaLyssa Smith goes to Vegas, I have no problem with that. Like I understand like wanting to your point, kind of taking the gamble, seeing what you can try and turn her into. I don't know if there's many better places to try and do that right now in terms of you have Asia Wilson there who has been a leader on this team. You have Becky, like you have championship experience. You have legit like great voices. I feel like in terms of like I am going to, if I'm a player, I'm going to listen to Asia Wilson. I'm going to listen to Becky Hammond. Like there's not much question with that. Chelsea Gray, like those are the type of players. Like yeah, I'm gonna listen to them. Like there's no real question in terms of that. That's where my problem is though. It's like I'm cool with getting that. I'm not even like fully opposed to you trading your 2027 first round pick if you're backing, like you said, you're going to still be good. I hate the fact that it's the 2027 for NaLyssa. That's where I start to struggle with it, just because I do think that even if you are a back half of the first round, is what you're getting from NaLyssa now going to be worth in a deep class? Like if you're pick 9 in that draft, you're still getting a very legit player. Like it is one of the most loaded classes that I mean I can't imagine many others being as stacked as what we're gonna see in that class. Like I mean that whole, especially like from the lottery perspective. But I mean I don't know if it's a big if at this point. And we've seen NaLyssa now in 2 different environments. And I'm not gonna act like they have been the greatest WNBA environments to go and be in either, right? Like in terms of comparing it to what you're going to be in Las Vegas, in terms of championship wins and solid vets and greats in terms of players. Like Indiana was super young, and Indiana has had their own problems with the franchise. Dallas was just, I mean, we've seen how Dallas has gone this season. So it's not like there's been exactly like a stable environment around her to go and have that growth. I worry. In terms of where Vegas is right now, compared to what NaLyssa Smith can raise them to be, I don't know if there's enough value in that to go and get that first round pick. But that's the gamble. That is what you are hoping to be. But I guess do you see NaLyssa just immediately being inserted into the starting lineup here and Asia Wilson going to the 5? Do you think what the plan will end up being for Vegas?
I mean, you get the impression that that Asia doesn't really want to start at the 5 in the kind of like in the NBA we've seen with the guy who was in LA who got traded for Luka.
Anthony Davis,
yeah, who never wanted to be considered a center, has never wanted to start at the 5. In the same sort of way. So maybe Stokes continues to start at least for now, and they bring Smith off the bench and try and like work her in like that, and then they move forward. I think sort of what I was thinking while you were talking there is the one thing we don't know is what else might have been available for that same first round pick.
For sure.
Like if you call around the league, could they have got Kayla Thornton from Golden State for that same pick? Could they have got Aaliyah Edwards from Washington, who's sort of been out of their rotation a little bit with how well Austin and Kiki Irifen have been playing. So yeah, and maybe they should have held on to it in case some of those players available now become available as we get closer to the deadline. The question was whether you need to pull the trigger right now as well to make this move. Like, and how far away someone like Megan Gustafson is from returning from her injury. Right. Could they have waited for that? Although Becky Hammond never seemed to want to play her last season.
Yeah, not really. Yeah.
So yeah, that probably wasn't going to make a big difference. But yeah, who knows whether something else was out there that would have been worth waiting for instead of making this move.
Yeah, that's also, I think, a great point, because obviously we're saying this, we don't know what the market is. We don't know what calls they made. Because to me, I completely agree. Like if you were going for a win now, a player like Kayla Thornton is absolutely like more of like the fit in terms of the timeline of this, and not having, there's not really an if with Kayla Thornton, right? Like you kind of know what you're getting from a player like that. And I think that is also what's interesting to me, is that technically speaking, NaLyssa Smith is still, I think, 24, I think, like right in that range. Like technically speaking, if NaLyssa Smith is able to develop into the trajectory of where she was drafted initially by Indiana, technically this could be a move for the future. But it's just such a large if at this point. And if it ends up working out, I mean, it's a phenomenal move. But again, we don't know what the rest of the value was across the league. But I just, in terms of thinking, like, if I could find win now players next to Asia Wilson that fit next to Asia Wilson, I can't imagine that NaLyssa Smith was number one option in terms of that. Like if that is the mold that you are going to look for. And again, you paid what could end up being a pretty damn hefty price for that. Like I don't know. I'm not moved. I'm not seeing, again, in a vacuum, I understand, but just the price paid is a little too steep for me. I'm not gonna lie. It's a little too steep.
Yeah, I mean, however good they think that, like their floor is, we're seeing like literally this season that you've got a healthy Asia Wilson, Jackie Young, Chelsea Gray, and they're 500.
That's where I'm like, that's where I'm like, if like, are we sure it doesn't, like, are we sure that this is the worst it gets? You know, like for the Aces, because like on one hand, I'm like, okay, if you have Asia Wilson on your team, your floor, you would think, is, like higher than most because you have Asia Wilson on your team. But that's where I get worried, where it's like, we're seeing it right now. And I don't think that, to me, I think that the core four idea in Vegas has run its course. And I don't think that is going to be the strategy going forward. But to me, this is an investment in that strategy. Like, and trying to fit around what your core four is now. Like, and so that's where it's also like, it feels like it's almost kind of like stuck in two brains, where it's like, it feels like this is on the way out, and like we've seen results now for 2 years, and like obviously you make the KP for Jewel trade, but like the idea of the core four we've now seen 2 years now where it hasn't really panned out. And like obviously, if the Aces go on a run, like like in the rest of this regular season, it starts panning out again. They're on a bit more of an upward trajectory right now. But if it stays at this level, we've now had 2 years of sample size where it's like this core four idea doesn't really work. Not with this group. Not anymore. And so like, what does the pivot look like from there? Because you don't have any first round picks. Like you are completely banking on the fact that you think you can lure players in free agency, which I mean, fair enough. Like you've been able to do that in the past, but it's a lot in this one basket. And if Vegas bottoms out and like they just become a generally bad team, are like what is the pivot there? Like from that standpoint, you can't draft. You built this team through the draft to begin with, and now you've used all your first round picks trying to trade and maintain it really. And I just don't know if there's how much left in terms of shelf life there is to maintain with this idea of the core four. So I don't know. I don't know. It's again, if NaLyssa pans out, more power to you. But I'm not sure I'm exactly moved on it.
I mean, I guess we should touch on what we think of this trade for Dallas as well. That
hey, I love it. I mean, Dallas.
Yeah, getting a first round pick for Smith seems like a home run at this point, basically. But I mean, I guess you kind of have to worry about. I mean, they brought her in kind of as a pair with DeJounte Carrington.
That is.
You wonder how much you're upsetting Carrington. You wonder how much that kind of affects your reputation around the league to a certain extent, that you've made this move with them, with their personal relationship in mind, and now you've just sort of traded one where they barely knew it was coming at all. And whether that hurts you in the future, because reputation, as we're going to talk about with another issue that happened yesterday, can be a big thing in this league. There are a limited number of places you can go and a limited number of teams and players who make a difference. So whether you have a good reputation among the players and the other personnel around the league becomes really important, because that has a big effect on who you can bring on to play on your team.
Right. No, 100%. Like from a pure basketball perspective, I make this trade 10 out of 10 times if I'm Dallas. Like you go and get I mean, obviously we talked about this. This is a great draft class, and we don't know what Vegas is going to be by then. And NaLyssa, I kind of been in and out of, like, in terms of importance, it kind of honestly depended on who was even available for Dallas as a whole, more than it was what NaLyssa was producing on the court. I make that trade basketball wise every time. Like I have no qualms with that. But I do think you bring up an interesting point in terms of the talk around the league and how that is for Dallas, because obviously we saw the tweets from NaLyssa and DeJounte, like this was a shock, it sounds like. And generally speaking, one, we don't get many regular season trades in the WNBA. Like that's just like in comparison to some of the other professional leagues just in general. But also to then have it be a surprise trade for the players involved, I feel like is even less common. So like in terms of the potential shockwaves that this can send out, this is an uncommon thing. And with that, the potential shockwaves are way larger than if this was something that happened all the time. And I think also, not that I think Dallas, frankly, really cares about the record this season. Like I think we kind of know where we're at, but it felt like this Dallas team had been another team, like similar to Vegas, on the upward trajectory. Like their last like 7 games or so had looked better. And a lot of it had to do with Paige playing incredible. But like generally speaking, you're winning more games. And there had been like odd moments, I feel like, with the locker room, and like there has been like different talks on social media and whatnot of like people, whether it be the coaching or whatever it is, like, but it felt like everything had been on the up. And this is something that, if it becomes a large problem in the locker room, can tank all that progress. And that is what, from like a this season perspective, intrigues me the most, is that if we see any cracks due to this move. And like I don't feel like we saw and this might have been just me missing it, I don't feel like we saw any other like Wings players react really on social media. I felt like I had only seen NaLyssa and DeJounte react. So like in terms of that, like again, I could have just missed it, but like it wasn't some like whole like like shock from everybody, you know? Like but I don't know.
I tend to be somewhat separate from the social media world of the players as well. I rely on the rest of you guys to keep me updated.
Yeah, I wish I could be a bit more separate at times. But yeah, so to me, but from a basketball perspective, I don't feel like you get a 2027 first from NaLyssa Smith 10 out of 10 times. Yes, like I'm ripping your hand off, shaking it. Like I am absolutely doing that deal. So it's not as much to talk about right now and from a Dallas front in terms of like what this means for this season, but I think you're losing a player that had already kind of been phased out, and you're getting a potentially massive asset in a loaded draft class who do that 10 out of 10 times. Any closing thoughts on this before we move on to our other bit of, I guess, shocking news, if you will?
I mean, I was just going to touch on what you mentioned there, that for this season, if this were to affect like the locker room, I do think that's one of the most overlooked elements of good teams. That when I talk to like sources in the league, you kind of get the feeling that this is the stuff that matters and that fans and media don't talk about. This is the area that gets overlooked the most, in that whether your playing staff gets along and whether the atmosphere is good on a team has a massive impact on whether a team goes anywhere that season. Yeah, and like really has to be considered when teams are putting the roster together. And like the GMs do think about this stuff, because most of them have been there long enough to know that if your atmosphere is toxic in the locker room, then it leads to losses. And yeah, I think sort of from the outside, we often just assess these players on who can score the most points, who can play some good defense, so on and so on, their performance on the court. But the rest of the stuff does end up mattering and does end up impacting wins and losses.
Yeah, well, you bring up reputation around the league and locker rooms, and Golden State made their first slip up in terms of something like that. Julie Manlou wins in Euro, is playing for Belgium, skips out on the celebration, immediately flies back and gets cut. Like, brutal. Like, their team is celebrating with the king, right? Is that what it was? Like actively celebrating with the king. And Julie said, I got to get back to Golden State. I got to get back to the Bay. I got games to play. And then gets cut. Already kind of just I feel like a semi-surprising cut to begin with, like just in general. But then you get into just the taste of like how it was done. And this feels like in terms of that frame of mind of like the reputation of Golden State and everything, which I mean, I feel like if you look across the board, the facilities, the fan base, like in terms of like what they are offering potential free agents and stuff, it's been a whole lot of good, like across the board. But this was their first kind of slip up to me. For you, Richard, your reaction to that cut just in general and the way that it got done.
Well, from a pure playing perspective, I kind of get it in that, I mean, she barely hit a shot before she left to start with. The percentages aren't good. And Caitlin Chen looked decent, pretty like solid, worth keeping, and is obviously about a decade younger. So if you're looking to the future, then I kind of understand wanting to keep the roster spot to keep her. But yeah, the way it was handled has obviously ended up looking horrible, in that she's on a flight which is a hell of a long way from Greece back to the west coast of the US. That's 12 hours, maybe more like 15 once you've got a connection, if there's a change somewhere. And then she, like you could see from the social media, she pretty much found out she was getting cut as she lands. And that's horrible. It looks like maybe someone screwed up, because if you look at the transactions, they cut Chloe Bibby and Bree Hall yesterday, and that's in the transactions from last night. The Van Loo cut is not on there. They announced it right at the same time on their own Valkyrie's social media.
Yeah.
So it kind of feels like, to me, maybe someone jumped the gun on the Van Loo cut. Maybe she wasn't supposed to be getting, like, it wasn't supposed to go through at that point, maybe. Like they were going to talk to her after she landed and then make the actual move the following day, which at least would have been less horrible.
A little bit better,
less horrible publicly. It still wouldn't have been great in terms of making her fly all the way back, then cutting
Right.
her almost immediately, making her miss the celebrations in Belgium in order to do it. But it would have looked a lot better to the sort of front-facing element, so what the
Right.
fans are seeing. Yeah, I mean, they'll probably recover. It's one move, one mistake. They've obviously got they've done really well in terms of what they've managed to build so far, what people have seen. But yeah, if they thought they were ever getting Emma Mieseman, they're probably not now.
Ruining it for everybody. Ruining it for everybody. We're trying to get Emma Mieseman back to the W. Every time like enough cap space opens up, we're like, well, it could be Emma Mieseman, and it never is. And stuff like this is gonna make sure that it never will be. And it's sick. It makes me sick to my stomach.
But yeah, I like Van Loo as a player. I wouldn't be totally surprised if someone claims her off waivers or signs her afterwards. Even with that shooting percentage she's put up this season, because we know how hot she can get on the right night. She was a leader in Golden State with all of those young international players. Even though she's only had one previous season in the WNBA, you could see the amount of time she spent like talking to other players, like helping Carla Lake through what she needed to do on the court, what was going on. So yeah, I could see her as one of the bench guards in Seattle. There's obviously a personal relationship in Connecticut if they wanted to bring her in there because she's worked with Mesian before. Yeah, I think there are options. We'll see whether anyone wants to try and bring her in, because I think she could still do a job in this league.
Yeah, no, I agree. Richard, it's always great talking. Our cap space expert. I know whenever I don't know what's going on, I can go check your timeline, and I can at least try some. I was like, I know some of these words. Like, okay, I know some of these.
I do
words.
my best. I
know
try
some
to break it down.
Well, Richard, we appreciate you as always, and make sure you guys stay tapped in here on the Her Hoop Stats Network, our daily weekly podcast. Make sure you tap in tomorrow as well. I think it's Chelsea and Jamie, my old press break friends. They're doing it tomorrow, so make sure you tap in for them and you subscribe here on the network. And we'll see you next time.